economists are almost unanimous in our thinking of what is the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that is to put a price on greenhouse gas emissions. So you could do that through either what's called a carbon tax, just taxing greenhouse gas emissions directly, or you could adopt a cap and trade program. Unfortunately, what we often rely on policies that are not pricing carbon, and that's where a long line of research has looked at what are the efficiency costs associated with relying on those alternatives. Actual greenhouse gas benefits from biofuels or ethanol in particular vary considerably depending on what the feedstock is. So there are many different ways to make ethanol. You can make it from corn, you can make it from sugarcane, and you could also make it from what are called energy crops like miscanthus or switchgrass. And depending on which of those crops you use to make a gallon of gasoline changes what the ultimate CO2 benefits or greenhouse gas benefits from a gallon of ethanol. Corn-based ethanol, we believe, has a very marginal impact on greenhouse gas emissions. What are so-called second-generation ethanols that are made out of these energy crops, those can reduce greenhouse gas emissions as much as 80% relative to a gallon of gasoline. Why do we rely on these inefficient policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? So economists agree that the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is through a carbon tax. But we rely on alternatives, one of which is the renewable fuel standard instead. What we find, the first question we ask in this line of work is how much more costly is the renewable fuel standard relative to a carbon tax? And we find that it's about 2.5 to 3 times more costly. Why do we rely on these policies? Although the renewable fuel standard on average is less efficient, it creates a bunch of large, substantial winners. We're able to estimate the gains county by county from both the renewable fuel standard and a carbon tax that leads to the same reductions. And what we find is, although on average the renewable fuel standard is inefficient, there are counties out there that gain as much as $6,000 per person per year from the renewable fuel standard. So what we surmise is that those counties are certainly going to write their congressman or congresswoman promoting a renewable fuel standard. But the typical county that loses, say, $20 a year under the cap and trade, they're not going to write their congressman saying that we need to replace the renewable fuel standard with cap and trade. So the politics, the fact that these inefficient policies create these big winners creates a climate for the inefficient policies to actually be adopted. Whereas the efficient policy, because there's no big winners under it, there's nobody actually trying to promote those policies other than economists.